What is up, you amazing people? It is Anima, and today I want to talk about Blasphemous 2, a game with lore that's so complex that it rivals Game of Thrones. Okay, so it's not that bad, but the many different characters, enemies, bosses, all that await you in Custodia can be quite overwhelming, and the story itself not only interesting, but also complex. So as we go into this game, I do want to say that it probably helps to play the first one, as this one starts us off right from the end of the last DLC from Blasphemous, Wounds of Eventide. The penitent one has returned to take on the miracle after the heart in the sky foretold the birth of a new child. However, to do so, he must take on the Archconfraternity, a group of penitents with the task of stopping you. Which, again, it seems like there's a lot to understand, but really it's a lot more simpler than it seems. It's just that the plot gets buried under grotesque creatures and a mountain of lore that is incredibly interesting to look into and to read about and to research, but honestly doesn't change how you would approach the game, as it's a simple go fight bad guys try to stop you. That kind of deal. Although don't mistake me, I'm not trying to downplay just how interesting the entire story is, or how they've taken certain aspects of Catholicism and created grotesque scenery, disturbing creatures, and also played off of what many would consider would be the dark side of religion. We're not talking spotlight type dark, but dark nonetheless. And if you haven't played the first one or were unable to beat it, then I might be the best person to get a review from, because I too was unable to beat the first one, as I found it just really difficult at times, while also being incredibly punishing. But there was always life into the game, and it made me want to play. I just was unable to get past a certain difficulty spike. Now, with that being said, I went into Blasphemous 2 pretty much unaware of the lore or the story, and honestly, to make matters worse, I even found it difficult to follow as I was playing the game. And where I can appreciate them working so hard on story makeup and lore and all of that, for me, the game was really more about just overcoming an incredibly difficult obstacle and the combat that was in this game. So as you're reawakened and ready to take on the miracle, you have a few other obstacles in your way first, starting off with arguably the most difficult decision for me, and that is what weapon to start with. You see, in this game, you actually get to choose one of 3 weapons. Now don't worry, as you play the game, all 3 will become accessible to you. Now I started off with Verindicto, which is basically a gigantic incense burner. It by far does the most damage, and is also the slowest. There's also the dual blades, which are incredibly fast, but also incredibly weak, and then right in the middle, you have your good old trusty sword. Now all 3 of these will become incredibly important, not only for fighting enemies, but also traversing the land, which I have to say, I wish the game did a better job explaining that a little bit. There's like these angel statues holding mirrors, and the only way to get through them is actually by hitting them with the dual swords, and it kind of propels you from the mirrors. With the other 2, it's pretty self-explanatory. The giant incense burner just busts through walls and things of that nature, as where the sword will cut through organic material, if you will. And I was really happy to see that visually they kept the same environment, the same aesthetics that they had in Blasphemous 1, is that was such a big part of the game, is just how creepy and grotesque everything was, yet at the same time desolate, cold, almost sad. It was a very bleak world, but that's really what added a lot of life to the game in its own way, when you would see contrasting colors like reds from the penitent one, or even different enemies, as you can see a world of death and despair, but shades of life in contrast with the colors that they use just ever so slightly to help the characters really stand out. Visually speaking though, it's really the details that bring this game to life and gives this game not only this beautiful yet disturbing look to it, and where they stayed true to the aesthetics of the environment and of this world. I'm glad though that they changed up gameplay a little bit, but not too much. Enough to add on, but yet not destroy what they had already built. You see, there is much more than just the 3 different weapons. You also have different abilities that you can learn for each weapon, and these abilities include things like wall climbing, double jump, to different abilities you can do with your specific weapon, whether it be just like a different air attack or a more powerful form of elemental control. And while it's cool to be able to unlock so many abilities, part of me thinks some of these things shouldn't have been locked, and other parts of me appreciate the options, but yet you hardly ever use most of them. And if I'm being honest, it does kind of become muddled and kind of chaotic amongst all the different options and abilities that you have, as well as playing off of different weapons that you have. It becomes almost like an embarrassment of riches, as you don't really use half of the stuff that you acquire. And honestly, I'm not going to ting the game for giving you more options and more game style choices, but I will say that it's just some of it didn't feel necessary. I guess that's how I'll put it, or a lack of cohesiveness between the abilities, as where this game is incredibly fast-paced. Sometimes actually using abilities seemed more like a hindrance than something that helped you. And yes, the game still performs incredibly well. The controls, buttery smooth, they didn't mess with any of that. Everything is tight and responsive, just like you want it to be in these type of games, where it's just critical that your character does what you want when you want to. I did also enjoy the figures. You see, you could collect these figures and put them on a mantle, if you will, and really what they did is just give you, like, generalized help. Something like you would have resistance to lightning, or you would inflict more damage, you gathered less guilt when you died, things like that that for me really seemed to help me get past certain aspects of the game that were becoming overwhelming towards the end. Having that in my back pocket really seemed to help me get through some of those really difficult boss battles. And while playing the game, I did feel like consistency was a bit of an issue, as there were even some just random enemies that seemed to be more difficult than some bosses. Not most of them, but there's a couple that stick out. And while I would say the first 3 bosses or the first 4 bosses are definitely doable, after the main 3, that boss is almost impossible. And the final boss, quite easy. It's all over the place, and I felt like that with a lot of this game. I really appreciated what they did, and I think it's a fantastic game. It's just, if it was anything but Blasphemous 2, I think it would get maybe a little bit higher score. But when compared to the first one, I feel like it's a little bit sloppy. And I know that that's hard to say because so many people love this game, and trust me, I really do too. I just feel like a little bit more organization, a little bit more consistency could have gone a long way with this one. And I must say, I think I'm being nitpicky because I see the potential, because I see all the stuff they have lined up and how much I enjoyed this game, but it could have just been a little bit better, which for me would have propelled it to an even higher score. I'm not even saying that they took a step backwards with this one, as I do appreciate a lot of the things that they added into the game, and yet keeping true to the Blasphemous name. I just feel like they needed a little bit more consistency, more organization amongst all the stuff that they brought to the table. Now, beyond that, I have to say that it's a finished game that plays really well, and that's a lot in 2023, let alone being nitpicky over things like, abilities or even difficulty spikes. Almost seems a little hyperbolic in this day and age. So take from that what you will. But I also have to say, I actually beat this game. I've never beaten the first one, so for me, it's probably a little bit easier, a little bit more accessible. I can only say that because of my past experiences with the first one and actually completing this one. Although I will say, with all of these different aspects of the game, the different enemies, the lore, all of that, I actually want to go back and play the first one again and see if I can maybe overcome some of those challenges. Maybe I just wasn't ready. The fact that this game can do that is also an incredibly bright spot for it. Any game that can actually make you want to play more of the game is good. So I'm not coming out here from a negative perspective. I'm just trying to find a few issues that I think could be improved. But my experience with this game is overwhelmingly positive. Everything from the performance to the combat to the controls, the detailed visuals, the sound, all of it come together like another masterpiece, honestly. It's just maybe a little bit behind its predecessor. Just slightly. Like, it's not that big of a difference. And part of me is thinking that maybe this game was too overhyped. Maybe I came in here expecting more, and it didn't reach that aspect, as where when Blasphemous 1 came out, nobody was expecting it to be as good as it was, and so it exceeded any sort of expectations. But ultimately, if I would give this game a number score, I would give it a 9 out of 10, and looking at value as well, 9 out of 10. Let me know what you guys think, though. I'm curious, have you guys played the first one? Are you interested in checking this one out? Do you like Metroidvanias, or do you not like Metroidvanias? Anything and everything down in the comment section is so appreciated. I love each and every one of you guys. You are all amazing. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.